Meeting of the Falls Township Board of Supervisors. It's about 7:35. We'll begin with the salute to the flag, please.
This is the Falls Township Governmental Access Channel 22 on Comcast and 40 on Verizon Fios. You're about to view the Falls Township Board of Supervisors meeting for December 7th, 2010. This program was pre-recorded earlier for playback at this time.
Mrs. Pullen, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Sefka?
Here.
Mr. Slosky? Mr. Harvey?
Here.
Mr. Dents?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Okay, good evening, everyone. You'll notice our township manager, Mr. Gray, is not here this evening. There was it's a family matter that he has to attend to, and so he's not with us, but he's left us in pretty good hands. I think he's prepared Mr. Clark and Mr. Sullivan. They're going to try and do his job as well as he does. And we also have some of our staff here as well, Mrs. Rukoff and Mr. Bennett, who are going to handle a couple issues for us as well. So the first item on our agenda tonight is a conditional use hearing for T-Mobile Northeast. This is for a co-location of cell phone equipment on an existing structure tower on Old Route 13. And so we're going to begin a conditional use hearing. We have to first have a motion to begin.
So moved. Second.
All right, motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a conditional use hearing. The applicant is T-Mobile Northeast LLC. The property is tax parcel number 13-40-45-1, located in the Township of Falls, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. This is an application requesting conditional use to allow the co-location of antennas with related equipment on an existing monopole tower located at 8900 Old Route 13. The applicant is represented by Bernadette Hohenadel, Esquire. And Ms. Hohenadel, if you would come to the podium, please.
Good evening.
Good evening. Ms. Hohenadel, it is the policy of the Board of Supervisors in conditional use hearings, especially those involving co-locations on existing antennas. If you would briefly identify the project, make reference to any exhibits that you would like to have part of the record, and then if you could give a brief summary of the application. We would then ask that you have your witnesses who are with you this evening come forward, have them to be sworn, and then individually ask them whether or not they heard your summary and whether or not your summary was accurate. At that time, you and your witnesses will be made available for questions from the board and anyone requesting party status.
Okay.
Is that process clear, Ms. Hohenadel?
That's very clear. Okay, thank you. As was mentioned, we're here on an application for a co-location on a communications tower. The applicant is T-Mobile Northeast, LLC. I'm going to preliminarily identify the exhibits, and I've already given a copy to the solicitor and to the court reporter. They have been pre-marked. I do have additional sets here that I can provide to the board. I would mark as A1 the zoning drawings. A2 is the impervious calculation, which was submitted in conjunction with the application. A3 is a structural analysis, which was prepared by a professional engineer and has been certified. A4 are radio frequency drawings and that provide information as to the existing condition and the condition as would be after the antennas were mounted. There is also a radio frequency interference report. That would be A5. A6 is the site lease. A7 is the CV for Mr. Gilmore, who is our engineer. And then A8 is an FCC, a copy of the FCC license for the user.
Sure, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
As was stated, we're here on a co-location. The existing monopole is 148 feet. Our request is that we would locate at 105 feet. The proposal is to mount 3 sets of 2 antennas each. There then would be 6 cabinets that would be mounted on 2 pads at the base of the tower and the related cables and other equipment that are required for use of the antenna. The size of the antenna is less than 5 feet by 3 feet as required by your ordinance. We are submitting this application pursuant to Section 209-50.2 of the ordinance. And what we are requesting and what the application, the summary has been provided, is that we, as I stated, we would go on at 105 feet, which would be the lowest mounting on the tower for now. The structural analysis has been prepared by an engineer as required, and it has reached the conclusion that the tower is sufficiently strong and of sufficient structural capability to bear the weight of the equipment that's currently existing on that tower, and also the additional weight that would be added on by the additional antennas that we are proposing to mount. We have radio frequency drawings for you to review, which indicate the amount of coverage that is available now, and then the coverage that would be available, expanding the service that we are able to provide off of this location once the additional antennas are mounted. In order for T-Mobile to provide adequate service to its subscribers, it is necessary for them to provide additional equipment, and this equipment is what we are proposing here this evening. We are required by the FCC to have adequate service. There can't be drops in service or things of that nature. So this is why we're proposing to do this. A search was done, a determination was made that this was a good location. Since there's already an existing tower there, it was determined that it would be better to go ahead on this tower as opposed to looking for a site that would be a new tower that would have to be proposed. You have in your packet there a copy of the FCC license, which is A8, and also a copy of the site license, which gives us the authority to apply this evening and also to mount our equipment on the tower and then put our cabinets in. There is a report which has been marked as A5, and that was submitted as required by your ordinance, and indicates that the equipment which we propose to add will not cause any radio frequency interference with any other communication facilities within the township. The tower as it currently exists meets all of the setback requirements for the LI district. We are not proposing to alter any of that at all. The property is surrounded by a fence. It is currently surrounded by, the fence has landscaping around it. It's our understanding that there may be some trees that need to be replaced. And at the time that we presented this to the Planning Commission, we did agree that if that were made a condition of the approval, that we would replace the trees that were necessary. We have reviewed the ordinance, and I believe that the application and the summary provided with it establishes that we have met all the requirements of Section 209.50.2 for co-location of a communications tower. At the time of application for the building permit, the certificate of insurance that's required by the ordinance will be provided at that time, as well as the information pertaining to the emergency contact name, phone number, and address that is required by the ordinance. And I would submit that we have satisfied the criteria and that we are entitled to the grant of conditional use. With me this evening, I have Bob Jackson from Velocitel, who was the site acquisition person. I also have Bassem Iskander, who is the radio frequency engineer, and then Mr. Bill Gilmore, who is our engineer. I would ask each of them to come up individually to introduce themselves, provide you with their identifying information and their employer for that to be on the record, and then I will ask them some questions.
Right. Just so you know, for our records here, audio and visual, we're going to have to make sure that everyone's speaking into the microphone.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Okay. Bob, do you want to come up first?
To sort of save a little time, if all three can come
come
up
up.
and Ms. Browndorf can swear all three at the same time.
Okay.
I got the under.
Okay. If, one by one, if you can introduce yourselves, state what your position is.
My name is Bob Jackson.
I'm sorry, I have to use microphone. So, sorry.
My name is Bob Jackson. I'm site acquisition specialist with Velocitel Inc.
Okay. Thank you.
Bill Gilmore, professional engineer.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bassam Iskander. I'm a radio frequency engineer. Last name is spelled Iskander, and my first name is Bassem.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson, you are the site acquisition person for this location?
Yes, I am.
And did you hear everything that I said and the information that I provided to the board as to the details of the application we've made this evening?
Yes, I did.
And to the best of your knowledge, is that information correct?
Yes, it is.
And did you review the zoning ordinance for Falls Township?
Yes.
And do you believe that the application and the information submitted complies with the requirements of the ordinance?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you. Do you want to individually ask questions, or?
Phil, are there any questions at this time for Mr. Jackson?
I don't know if Mr. Jackson's the right person, but I just like, how many other companies or other sets of antennas are mounted on that same pole? Are you going to be the second company on that pole?
Will be the fourth carrier on the pole.
Yeah.
Okay. And the pole's about 148 foot, and you're going to be at 105, but the other ones will be above you?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe that if you looked at page 3 of applicant's A1, that has sort of a depiction of what the tower looks like currently, and then also the location where our antenna will be mounted. It's on the right side of that page, and it shows the 3 mountings above it, and then will be number 4.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Jackson? No, I'm sorry. Mr. Gilmore. You are the professional engineer?
Yes, I am.
And did you review the structural analysis report which was prepared?
Yes, I did.
And do you concur that the tower, as it currently exists, is of sufficient strength to withstand the weight that's on it currently, and also what will be added by the new antenna?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And did you hear what the explanation I gave this evening as to the proposed use of the tower?
Yes, I did.
And do you agree that the information I provided is accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Does
Okay.
anybody have any questions of Mr. Gilmore?
Questions for Mr. Gilmore regarding engineering? Mr. Zipka, no? Mr. Snipes? No? Mr. Dents?
No.
No, I have none.
Mr. Iskander? You have been engaged as the radio frequency engineer for this particular site?
Yes.
Yes, and you made a determination based on the radio frequency drawings that have been provided to the board as A4, that the current situation required that there be additional antenna made available in order to provide adequate service?
Yes.
And is the second page of A4 the service that would be available once the new antennas are mounted?
Yes.
Yes. And do you believe that this is the best location for this particular addition to service to be provided?
Based on the fact that there's
I'm sorry, if you have to use my
Talk to
microphone,
the
I'm sorry.
mic, yeah.
based on the fact that there is an existing tower there, it is the best location for us.
And did you hear the information that I provided as well as the other witnesses here this evening?
I did.
And to the best of your knowledge, is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Iskander, regarding the radio frequency? No? Mr. Snipes?
Well, again, I'm not sure it's the right person to ask, but you said based on existing towers, this was the best location. Because I'm looking at the increase in service, which to my untrained eye doesn't look that dramatic, but I don't know how you make these calculations of where you need to improve the service. How did you choose this spot given on what kind of service is needed and what your customers will need?
Do you have that?
Well, what the tower is really providing is adequate in-building service, and that's the addition of the green layer to
Right, I
the,
see
to the
that.
map. So there is quite a few residences in the north, I guess northwest area of the tower, and the southwest area that will benefit from this, as well as extending in-vehicle coverage across the river and throughout the area, just solidifying that area of coverage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dents?
No, no questions.
I had none. Okay.
Does anybody have any further questions?
right, any further questions regarding this application? Mr. Zupka, no. Mr. Snipes?
I guess just, I mean, looking at the areas, is your ultimate intention to cover the rest of the areas that are showed here in yellow? Or, I don't know how you figure out how many more towers or how far you want to extend the service.
Ultimately, yes. At this point in time, though, I don't, there's nothing in the immediate area on my plate, and I am the engineer for this area, that is active. I think we have a couple of more areas that we're looking to fill in the township, just not in this immediate area.
Okay. All right, thank you.
No other review.
That's it.
Mr. Dents?
No questions.
Okay. The one questions I had, I'm paying attention here, Ms. Hodnadel, is that right? Oh, sorry.
Pretty good.
Close enough?
Close enough.
I apologize. I'm usually very good with names. But there's a traffic planning and design letter there, our traffic engineers,
Yes.
regarding exiting this property. There's vegetation, it is noting on the left-hand side, that is overgrown. It provides an
Yes.
obstruction to the site triangle.
And I guess I didn't mention that, but at the time of the Planning Commission, that was brought up as well, and we did agree that we would make the alterations that are required in order to comply with the comment made by TPD.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Yeah, you had said something about replacing trees, and I wasn't sure if that was something, another issue
That was
I had
something else. I
missed.
guess there's some trees that are around the fence that have died.
Okay.
But we will be replacing those as well as addressing the
The site
line
issue.
of sight issue there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all
And
I
if they
had.
needed to be made a condition to the approval, we are agreeable to those conditions.
Okay. Yeah, I think that seems reasonable. Mr. Clark, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hohenadel,
Yes.
other than agreeing to the conditions in the October 8th, 2010 letter from Traffic Planning and Design, do you also agree to the conditions in the October 11th, 2010 letter from James Sullivan from T&M Associates?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Nothing else, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Mr. Sullivan, I think he stole your thunder.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right. All right. Before we open for any public comment, we're going to need to close the conditional use hearing first. Is there a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. I see at least one hand for public comments. Is there a motion to open public comment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Mr. Dell?
Do not parties.
Andrew Dell, Falls Township, Planning Board member also. About the line of sight, when we were talking about this at the meeting, it seems like every person that's the last person on the tower gets stuck doing all of the work that all of the people on the tower should be doing. What is brought to my attention also is the landlord of the property, I believe it is his job to maintain the vegetation that's in question on the line of sight, not the current applicant. And so I don't know how we can go about doing this through the township, but as you notice, these towers, all the vegetation and trees end up dying around it, and the last person to put a piece of equipment up there gets stuck with the bill for fixing everything around the facility. So I know it's probably the landlord that's receiving the money for everybody on the tower. They don't seem to be spending the money maintaining these properties either. So they're taking the money for lease or rent or whatever you want to consider it and just letting these areas go natural. And we need to stay more on top of that. And the fact is, when we discuss this, I believe the area in question is the tenant's property, not the actual rented property. So
Okay.
I don't know if I know Mr. Bennett was at that meeting and he agreed, and I don't know if we send a letter out to some of these people and say, hey, you know, the line of sight on your property needs to be worked on. And I noticed that throughout the whole township, though a lot of the roads are becoming encroached with all these you've seen that Japanese knotweed and everything. It's growing right up to the roadside, and it is blocking a lot of driveways, line of sight, and a lot of people are going to have issues pulling out into traffic. So I don't want, every time a new applicant comes in for a usage, they shouldn't be stuck with a few $1,000s of vegetation clearing every time. The person who has that tower, the landlord or the property owner, should be maintaining that site.
Yeah.
So I just
Okay.
want to bring that up.
All right. Thank you. It's a good
Thank
point.
you.
Thanks. Any other comments? I see no hands. Is there a motion to close public comment?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any final comments before we look at this issue? No? If there's no other comments, then is there a motion regarding the conditional use for T-Mobile at 8900 Old Route 13, tax parcel number 13-040-045-001?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, what you said, and I approve that we move, I propose that we move to approve it.
Okay.
Second that motion.
All right, motion is made and seconded to approve the conditional use. Mrs. Pullen, poll the board, please.
Mr. Zepka?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Dents?
Yes.
Mr. Sneakers?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Sure. All right, item 2 on our agenda is consider proposal from IC and E&E for electric generation and transmission for the township. I think Mr. Gray has prepped Mr. Clark for this particular topic, so we'll turn it over to him and let's see how he does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the rate caps coming off at the end of this year, and with PECO, who is our current energy provider, no longer providing energy as of January 1st, PECO will simply be the transmission lines. Large users, commercial and institutional and municipal, like the township, are out looking for to purchase electric for all of the township facilities. Mr. Gray, in consultation with David Bush, who is the acting executive director of the Township of Falls Authority, was put in contact, with Instrumentation Control and Energy Engineering LLC, which is a company that goes out and gets proposals for to provide electric services for the township. They have a proposal which has been provided for all of you, that they will go out and identify various proposals by December 9th of this year. Their proposed fee is $4,000, and they will go and get these proposals. One of the things that the board needs to consider is, because of the very short shelf life of these proposals, if the board is inclined to approve this proposal this evening, I would also ask that the board grant Mr. Gray the ability to execute these agreements on December 9th when they come in. Normally, and having done this in other municipalities, when the proposals are received, they are usually received sometime late morning, early afternoon, and they are usually good for a 4 to 6 hour period of time. And that would not necessarily provide us with an opportunity to convene a meeting and vote to accept the proposal. So that is what you have in front of you this evening. It's a proposal from Instrumentation Control and Energy Engineering to identify these proposals and provide them to the township by December 9th of this year.
Okay. So essentially what we're doing is this is a company that would sort of act like a broker for the township to go out and find companies that would sell us electricity for the best rate possible.
I will disagree with the term that you used, because the difference is they are not acting as a broker, because technically a broker would be acting for one of the companies, one of the energy companies.
Okay.
They are independent from the
All right.
energy companies. They are going out and soliciting proposals. One of the things that was attractive to Mr. Gray, and when he discussed this with me, was that many of the brokers take a percentage of the savings during the life of the contract, whether it's a 1 or a 2 or a 3 year contract. If they get you significant savings, you may end up paying them a significant amount of money. The proposal from Instrumentation Control and Energy Engineering is a flat fee contract. So once they go out and get you the best proposal that they can, the fee is paid, and then there's not a continuing obligation to them.
Okay. All right, comments or questions from board members? Mr. Zipka?
It's it seems like a whole lot of money for a short amount of work. I mean, I've been receiving solicitations from different utility companies to change over to their plan or to buy from them, and it spells out what they're charging per kilowatt and how long it's going to be and all their different services, and you can compare it against the electric bills that I have. It almost seems like we're spending $4,000 for something that, again, you know, maybe it's because it's commercial, but it just seems like we're spending $4,000 for something I think we should be able to do. That's it.
With all due respect, Mr. Zupka, the two factors that make it much more difficult to price for an entity such as ourselves as opposed to an individual are the amount of accounts that we have. We have 19 accounts in the township. So a deal needs to be struck for all 19 of those accounts. We have the Falls Township Barn, 3 Arches, the Falls Township Flag Light, the Falls Township 3 Arches Heat, 188 Lincoln Highway, traffic lighting service, private outdoor lighting, the Falls Township Senior Center, and there are the Salt Shed, Mill Creek Parkway. There are a lot of different accounts. And the other issue that comes in and why you need or why many commercial and institutional users are going to a company such as this is because of what is known as the load factor. Most commercial or township users use the majority of their electricity in between the hours of 8 and 5 or 8 and 6. And what that is when the electricity is the most expensive, because that's when these companies are selling the most of it. If you are able to break down some of these 19 accounts that are using significant amount of energy between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. the next morning, you're able to strike better deals. You're able to look at all of that and get a better deal, because the energy companies want to sell you energy at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's when they have less demand on their system. I will also tell you, just from another municipality of a smaller size, which has gotten one of these consultants to do work for them, that the amount of the fee was made up within the first 6 weeks will be made up within 6 weeks of the year in the amount of money that will be saved. I'm not saying that will occur here, but if he does his job right, most of this fee should be made up pretty quickly.
Because I've seen some of the commercial billing, again, not for our township, but I've seen some of the commercial billing for 3 or 4 different facilities owned by the same, we'll say the same group. And on a quarterly, they comes with a chart, and the chart shows you different hours of the day and how many kilowatts are being used, and it's broken down by the days of the week, the hours of the day. Again, I would think we should have something like that. Yeah, we might have 19 or 20 different facilities, but we should be able to compare one against the other, and then actually get and possibly make our own chart up of it, and then take what would be proposals from the different suppliers and see what they want, and we, you know, you actually ask them, or they will tell you per hour at noon or 3 in the afternoon what their charges are going to be. Again, I can understand having somebody do it, but it just seems like the $4,000 is a high amount for something that I really think we can do ourselves. That's all.
Okay. All right, I think it's a fair point. Mr. Snipes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I wonder if Mrs. Rukoff at all can weigh in on this. I don't know whether you have been following our electric expenses, and I don't even know the history of whether we've used this kind of broker in the past and how, if it saved us money, et cetera. Those, I don't know, could you comment on that, or?
Good evening. We have not used this kind of consultant in the past. There's been no need to. We've had PECO as our energy provider. It's just since the rate caps are coming off in January,
Right.
that we need this type of service. I see Mr. Zupka's point. I do think it will be a lot of analysis to go over 19 accounts and their peak usages and try to come up with the best provider for our needs. We had been approached by this company to provide us with this service, and I think it's a good idea with the rate caps coming off to find the provider that's going to give us the best for our money. I do not have a current analysis of the electrical costs, but I can certainly get one for you this week if you'd like to see it.
Another question, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Is this going to be potentially a situation based on the maximum usage for each account? We might have different suppliers for each account?
I do
Or
not
for
believe so.
Several different accounts, or it would be one
That
supplier
is not
for
my
all
understanding.
accounts?
Yes, it'll be one provider.
Right, that's the way it has to be.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dents, did you have any question for Mrs. Rukoff while she
No,
was?
I don't.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rukoff. Any questions at all, Mr. Dents? Or
I was just going to say that I thought that $4,000 was reasonable for the amount of work. It seems like a lot of work with 19 different accounts to shop it to all these different providers and in one day come up with, different proposals. But
I do have another question, Mr.
instead
Chairman.
of paying someone to put all that work into doing it ourselves.
On that issue, what percentage of our annual electric bill, let's say, would this actually amount to? Just in terms of thinking, how much are we spending in terms of,
Well, we typically
on this? Yeah, the $4,000.
Typically our electric bills just for the streetlights every month are $25,000.
Right, right.
So this is a fraction.
It's a small amount of.
Yeah, it's
what
a
we-
fraction of a fraction. Yeah, right.
I'm just trying to think of, this as an investment.
Right.
And what are we going to get in return, and how much would we actually save? If we're going to save tens of thousands of dollars, if that's a possibility, I don't know the business well enough to know that, then it seems money well spent.
I think we won't know until we actually
Right.
see their proposal.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And see how much rates increase as well.
Right. Okay.
That's all I have.
Yeah, and I do. Certainly, Mr. Zupka makes a very, very good point regarding, this seems like a relatively, simple thing to do. Shop around, find an electric company who can give us a certain amount of rate. I have had some conversations with Mr. Gray about this, and he does feel, Mrs. Rukoff has already alluded to this, that this would be a lot of work for him and for our staff to do, and this is a professional that is not only going to be able to do the work, but also going to be able to make the kinds of contacts that, quite frankly, Mr. Gray and Ms. Rukoff probably just don't know who to call at this point, and who are the providers that are out there. Certainly we'll know some of them, but there are going to be providers out there that, this company is going to be well aware of and could find us a lower price for than our people would even know where to find. So I do hear your point, but in my conversations, Mr. Gray felt much better about going this way. And when it comes to finance, obviously we have a great finance director, but Mr. Gray, of course, was a very good finance director here for a while as well, and he knows his stuff when it comes to this area. And so I take his. I always take his advice, but especially on these matters, I do tend to listen to him.
The one, if for nothing else, I feel better that this company is not a broker. So I feel they're not going to gain anything by whoever we go to. They're going to point us to the best direction.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that. Yeah, and I use the term sort of inaccurately, so I apologize if I caused any confusion with that. Okay, so is there any public comment needed? See one hand. Is there a motion to open public comment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Mr. Dell?
How many electric providers are there? How does somebody come in and use PECO's lines and actually come in cheaper than PECO?
PECO no longer sells energy.
They no longer sell energy?
No, PECO now has, the separate company is Exelon.
Okay.
And Exelon will have to deal with the transmission portion over the PECO lines, just like every other provider will. That's one of the things that's happened now, is PECO has been separated out from, they don't produce energy anymore. They think about it this way, they're the trucking company that delivers the goods, and Exelon is what produces it. So
Okay.
whoever travels over their lines has to pay them, and It's the same rate.
I mean, do PECO and Exelon have a unique relationship together, or are there multiple suppliers that are going to be using?
There are multiple suppliers who will travel over the PECO lines.
And they're all paying the same rates to rent the lines from PECO, basically?
From what I've seen in other municipalities, they're all paying the same rate to travel over the PECO lines.
Okay. I tend to agree with Mr. Zipka. I know 19 sounds like a lot, but, you know, streetlights obviously aren't on at 8 o'clock in the morning. There's one knocked out already. You can knock it back down to 18. I think it might take you a day to figure out where most of your usage is, and I would assume it would be this building between 8 and 5 o'clock. You know, it would hurt to try to call some of these places and get a rough idea of the savings, and it might not be worth changing at all. Who knows? I mean, I don't know where the best prices are, but if someone here just called and said, hey, we're thinking about moving our business to you, what are your rates, and make a call and check with the top 5 providers or 4 providers and get a sense or a flavor where you're at before you just, $4,000 I know in a big scheme of things is not a lot of money, but we keep outsourcing all the work that we could do here in maybe a day. It adds up at the end of the year. 4,000 here, 8,000 there, 10,000. By the time you get to the end of the year, those kind of expenses add up to more than some of your larger expenses. And you don't think of it that way until a year goes by and you start calculating all these small sums of money that we consider small in the big scheme of things, but they do add up to a lot. And I understand it's work to go through and analyze 19 different properties, but 3 Arches is basically a residential building. And there's 2 separate items right there. And I mean, not to make it sound like it's easy, but really most of these places are operating during the day, excluding your streetlights. I would think it'd be something fairly straightforward to call up and say, listen, this is our usage. This is how much power we used last year. What are your rates? What are you selling your power for if we decide to go with you? And I think maybe in the course of a day with 5 or 6 phone calls, you'd have a pretty good idea how much money you could save on your own and maybe save an additional $4,000. Just a thought.
Okay.
I mean, you could still utilize that company if you feel you're not able to do that, but maybe we could try doing it first and then, you know, give those guys a shot. Because it sounds like we have to move fast with them anyway.
Mhm.
So I think if we call them and they do it within a day or 2, I'm sure they have a computer program, and if they do this all the time, they're going to just shove our numbers in there. 20 minutes later, they're going to know exactly our usage, our rates, and everything like that. We're going to spend $4,000 for an hour's, 2 hours worth of work, which that's the kind of work they do. So they're going to be better at it. But I think we might be able to figure out on our own how much usage we have, how many peak hours, you know, how many kilowatts we're using, and just make a few initial phone calls just to see what's out there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Another hand, Mr. Obert?
These people have no idea. It's a commodity. It's like oil. It's like gas. It's like pork bellies. Can't just make a few phone calls.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Gallus Obert. I wasn't prepared to talk on a subject like this tonight, but if anybody read the Bucks County Courier Times, they had a tremendous article on the weekend over saving in electrical power. John Galloway's office has brochures over there that gives you a website that will list every one of the alternate suppliers of power. Okay, you can go there, you can pick your rate, you can pick anything you want. It depends on you whether you want to be a high roller or a low roller. I would suggest, I think there's about 32 pages on a state website considering electrical power and alternates. And I strongly suggest that everybody try and take a look at that themselves. They're doing it for industry, they can do it for government, they can do it for individual homes. If you spend over 500 kilowatts an hour a month, you can save anywhere from, doesn't sound like a lot, we'll say $10 to $15 a month over 8 months, 10 months. Mm-hmm. To somebody that's whatever, a night out or a payment on a car, whatever you want to do. But it can be done, but you're going to have to work at it. Whether or not this company would do that, I don't know. I just don't know. But look in the Bucks County Courier Times, got a tremendous article over it. And stop over to John Galloway's office and pick up the brochure on the power supply. And we'll go from there. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other hands? I see no hands. Or motion to close public comment?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask
Yes.
a question?
Sure.
I've heard several different stories about what PECO's increases will be for 2011. I've heard 10%. Recently, I heard 5%. Is there a particular date when they actually have to say when it is by law or not? And has anybody heard anything different
That
than
I don't know.
that
Mr. Clark, are
5%
you
or
aware?
10%?
Do they have to give a certain date?
No, and again, PECO will not be in the business of producing energy anymore. PECO is strictly going to be transmission.
Probably more.
Correct.
Exelon,
All right.
which will be the company that is producing it. All of these companies, since it is a public utility, are all regulated by the Public Utility Commission and will need to, for rate increases, will need to go before the PUC. There were tremendous horror stories about what was the doom and gloom of what was going to happen when the rate caps came off. But one of the things that it has done is the competition has helped keep all those rates from skyrocketing right now. And while it may end up hurting the smaller individual user, it's actually working to the advantage of the larger commercial user or the larger industrial or the larger institutional user. But there's no indication of where some of the rates for Exelon or others would go up with regards to private users.
So this 5 or 10% we hear for PECO is just relating to their transmission charges?
I believe it's relating to the transmission aspect of it, not into the generation aspect of it.
Right, right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Again, I did hear the concerns from people that, do we need to hire somebody outside to do this work? And again, I defer to the township manager who isn't here this evening, but my discussions with him where he felt more comfortable bringing this firm in to do this work rather than trying to figure out, negotiate it, with a limited amount of time. And obviously, he has other things on his plate. And Mr. Clark had talked earlier about the fact that even getting a quote from some of these companies is a very, very temporary quote. So calling somebody in the morning and asking for a quote, by the time you call other people and get back to that first company later in the afternoon, the quote might have changed. And so that's one of the things to consider too. So what I guess at this point, what the pleasure of the board is, if this is something, if we'd like to award these electric generation and transmission service to IC and EE in the amount not to exceed $4,000, we would also have to put on that motion or make a separate motion.
If you accept the proposal, then I'll ask that you
separate motion
authorize Mr. Gray to accept the proposal, the best proposal on December 9th.
And execute it.
And execute it.
Okay.
Now, how much is this company charging us again? 4,000 even?
4,000.
Even.
Not to exceed, yes.
Okay. While some of the public comment was going on and some of the other board members commenting, I was thinking about this, and I can see where this company, and again, not being a broker, but they have their, we'll say they have their computer programs where they can see what, and they're probably tied in with each of these, which each or 4, 5, 6 different, I'll say, I'm going to call the suppliers for power, for electricity. So they will be able to do it quickly. And they probably have a program already set up to analyze our usage here and compare it to what we're going to be able to get. And while it might only take them 2 or 3 hours, which $4,000 for that, they did have to have time a long time ago to to set up all these programs and to be into it. And with the changing of the service that's taking place now, we've never really dealt with it here. I've seen a couple of facilities in New Jersey that have been looking into this and changing. And while it doesn't, seeing what they're doing doesn't seem that hard. Again, 18, 19 facilities, but not having anybody that will say is even close to, I don't want to say an expert, but anybody as close to really knowing what all the ins and outs is for the first time. I'm going to say this probably is the best decision to let them do it and see what's going to happen. So I will I will make the motion to go with this company for $4,000.
Okay. All right. So motion is made. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Motion is made and seconded. Mrs. Pullen?
Mr. Zepka?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Dent?
Yes.
Mr. Sins?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, could I just add one thing?
Sure.
We can certainly try this year. If it turns out that we actually don't save much or don't save anything through their efforts, of course, it's $4,000 is money, but if, as a matter of fact, they do actually save us some tens of thousands of dollars, then we'll find out it's worth it, and next year we can make the decision to do it or not do it next year based on that.
Jonathan, they are talking about 2 to possibly 3 years to lock in to lock in the rates, but still,
Right.
if there's nothing there, there's nothing there. But I started thinking if we did it ourselves and it didn't work out real good, and then hindsight is we screwed up.
Right.
We should have done it and spent the money. But like I said, I'm willing to do it. So.
They may lock us into a rate, but, if we can find a better deal, you can always change. I mean,
Well,
we may decide
it
next year
de-
that we
it
think we
depen-
can shop them for a better rate again.
Well, true, but it also depends how the contract's written. But yeah, but once we see how it's done and how it is, we will have a better knowledge of it.
Okay. All right. So we've made a motion and approved going with IC and ED. Now we have to have a motion to authorize Mr. Gray to execute the agreement when it comes in from this company. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right. Okay. All right, next item on our agenda is the consider appointing an auditor for the 2010 financial audit. Every year, the township hires an auditing firm, professional auditing firm, to audit the books of the township. For several years, this was done by a company named Major Mastro. The typical accounting procedures is that you do not keep one accountant for too long. You want to have a fresh set of eyes come in and take a look at the books and take a look at procedures and give you a new perspective. The idea being really, I guess, a lot of it sprung from the Enron problems many years ago, where you had accountants that were sort of getting a little lazy and not looking over the books of the company as closely as they could have or should have. And so last year, for the first year, we went, first year ever really, away from Major Mastro and went to a company called Mercadian. And so Mr. Gray went out for, I don't know if Ms. Rukoff or Mr. Gray went out and looked for some prices for companies. Major Mastro and Mercadian were the only 2 of the 5 we contacted that sent in an amount or sent in a cost basically for the audit for next year. Major Mastro at $22,000, Mercadian for $30,000. Mercadian is the same price as they were this current year for their audit. Ms. Rukoff worked with both firms, I guess, Major Mastro and Mercadian, and she is here to answer any questions that might be raised at that time or on this issue. Ms. Rukoff, is there anything you want to say in addition to what I just added or commented on? No? I did a good job? Okay, good. Thanks. Comments or questions from board members? Mr. Zupka?
No, I have none.
Okay. Mr. Snipes?
Yes, I'd like to hear from the finance director, her impression of the two companies, and if she has a recommendation for us.
Hello again. Worked with Mercadian last year for the first time. They were very qualified, very professional. They did a thorough job with the audit. We talked about a lot of internal controls, and there were no findings. We finished up with a great audit, but they were very easy to work with, very easy to keep in touch with, get a hold of, ask questions to, and they were very thorough, very professional. So we used Major Mastro for a long time. I was also very comfortable with them. I believe they audited the township for 6 years.
Yeah, 5 or
They
6
were
years, I
here
think.
Prior to my coming here, I think it was the 6th year, that last year. Also a very professional firm, a smaller firm, and we were always very satisfied with their work. So either firm, you're getting good professional service.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Mr. Dents?
No, no questions.
Okay. All right. Any public comment needed? See no hands. Okay. So obviously the issue, I guess if we go with the typical sort of accounting practices and procedures, you would retain Mercadian for another year or so, just to keep the perspective, I guess. But again, there's a price difference here as well. So I guess we'll leave it up to the, comments or questions from board members in terms of which direction you'd like to go in. Both firms, as you heard, are very, very well qualified. Mercadian slightly larger firm. Both are local. So it's sort of up in the air at this point.
Mr. Chairman, does anyone remember what we had put in our budget for auditing services?
Don't remember. I see Mrs. Rukoff is looking as we speak.
And you were also saying that, Mr. Chairman, the procedure might be typically to stay with the same accounting firm for
generally, generally
auditing firm.
it's good practice. And again, I'm getting this from Mr. Gray, him being the person who did this for a very long time, to stay with one company for a little while, then switch. And the auditing companies know this as well. This is typical. You're not really supposed to have the same auditor for endless amounts of years, unless it's like your brother-in-law or something like that. So I'm saying a hand in the back 5 years. So it's about Major Mastro. I want to say was here 5 years, maybe 6 at the most, but Mercadian, this is their first year. So go ahead, Ms. Rukoff, what do you
As
have?
far as a budget figure, we had budgeted $25,000 because that was in line with prior year's audits.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So
does this mean that Mercadian had actually increased their fee this coming year?
I think there were 30 last
Actually,
year, too.
No, they had bid more last year, but brought their price down to $30,000 to
That's
be
right.
competitive.
Right.
And then they kept it at $30,000 for this year, so they did not raise their price.
That's right. Yeah.
I didn't note this, but I don't know exactly what our rationale was for only approving $25,000 if we had actually paid $30,000 this past year.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure of that.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Just,
Or if it was even-
just being conservative, we had previously paid in the low 20s
Right.
prior to Mercadian.
Okay.
Ms. Rukoff, with a Major Mastro, now you had said they are a smaller firm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would you know, well, my question is, can they send different people than we've had here before? Then it's, we're getting different eyes looking over something, even though it's the same company that, was auditing us for, 5 or 6 years. But fresh eyes or newer employees or...
They, I know the last 2 years that we had them, we had the same principals on the more senior staff, but the less senior staff was usually someone new. So they usually send 3 people. Sometimes one or the other spends more time here, and that is usually the more junior member, and that is normally a different person each time.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think we've heard that obviously either firm would do a great job hearing from Mrs. Rukoff. There's a difference of $8,000. I don't know if we want to be driven by a desire to save $8,000, which is always a good idea. If we go with Major and Mastro, which put the bid in at $22,000, it's $8,000 less than Mercadian. Sounds like we can't go wrong with them.
No.
So the other argument is, however, it seems to be good to switch up and stay for a while before we move on to a different firm. So
That is true. There are benefits to continuity.
Right.
They've only been with us 1 year. So it's not that we'd lose any continuity switching back to Major Mastro. Obviously, they know our
us.
systems
Right.
and our reporting. So it is primarily a price difference.
Right. Well, maybe it's the prudent thing to go for the lower cost. I don't know how others feel.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to go with a Major and Mastro for $22,000. They've been here before. Mrs. Rukoff, yeah, put a little bit of my fears aside that, you know, they do have fresh eyes that come in and look, and they've done a good job for us in the past. So my motion is to use Major Mestro.
Okay. Sir, second the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. Mrs. Pullen, poll the board, please.
Mr. Zupka?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
No.
Mr. Dents?
Yes.
Mr. Snipes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, Mrs. Rukoff. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right, item number 4 on our agenda, consider authorizing advertisement enacting Chapter 158 nuisance service calls. This was a proposed ordinance that we have been working on, our solicitor have been working on with our police department. It would have allowed the police department to identify and focus on certain properties in the township, residential properties especially, that were considered nuisance properties. In other words, properties where the police are always being called to for various, you know, activities that just sort of take up a lot of time and a lot of resources, and probably are not very welcome in the neighborhood. We got some information earlier today. The police department is, there are a few things they wanted to look at with this. They wanted to fine tune, and so they asked us actually to table this for this evening. And so, following their request, which I think is a pretty pretty logical one, I'll ask for a motion to table this issue for this evening. I don't think we have to specify a date, so we'll table it for some kind of for some future action. Is there a motion to table this authorization of advertisement?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion to table has been made and seconded. Mrs. Pullen?
Mr. Zupka?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Dents?
Yes.
Mr. Snipes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Another issue. Authorization of advertisement. This is regarding housing standards. This would be Chapter 138, and we have Mr. Bennett here this evening to deal with this. One of the more consistent complaints that I get, and I know that some other board members get, focuses on properties in the township that have one or more cars that are parked on the property that seemingly don't ever go anywhere. They're project cars. They're, you know, people are working on them, and in many cases for year after year after year, they seem to sit there, and not a whole lot of work seems to get done. Typically, this has been a little bit of a sort of maybe a hole in our zoning ordinances or our code ordinances that have limited the amount of enforcement we can do, and so responding to a lot of those public concerns, we asked Mr. Bennett to take a look at what he would feel comfortable with in terms of enforcement. I think he looked at some other neighboring townships to get some idea, and Mr. Clark also worked on this with him, I think. So, Mr. Bennett, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of a rundown on what we're looking at here.
Yes, before. Okay, what they're proposing is to make it that if you have an inoperable vehicle, it can be permitted to stay there for 6 months, which is pretty lenient. Right now, the ordinance says that they can stay there indefinitely, one unlicensed, unregistered vehicle. There are vehicles that have been in one spot for 15 years, and we have no way to make them move them vehicles because, you know, it says they're allowed to have it. So this way, if they are permitted 6 months and they have a project they're working on, or, you know, something breaks down, you know, they'll have plenty of time to get it repaired and moved out of there, just to clean the township up. Some vehicles are just left forever.
Okay. All right, and this would apply to just motor vehicles themselves. It wouldn't necessarily apply to somebody who has like a, you know, sort of like a boat on a trailer or something. That doesn't apply. This is really like a car. You've got a truck. It's something that, you know, it's just is not really it's not licensed, it's, you know.
It just says motor vehicles is
Yeah.
what's proposed.
Okay, all right. All right,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, comments or questions, board members?
I know
Mr.
this is
Zipper?
just for advertisement, and Mr. Bennett, I know very well what, you know, what's brought this on. And you and I talked briefly about this, but frankly, I don't like the wording of this.
Okay.
I think we're leaving it very vague. You brought up something, how about boats? I can point out someplace there's 2 boats that have been sitting for forever. One's been sitting there so long, the tires on the trailer have rotted off. So we're stating motor vehicles. Well, this is a boat. I'm going to say, right off the top of my head, we should take the motor part out of it. A vehicle could be rolls, flies, floats, or glide. It's a vehicle. So, you know, we do away with that. And maybe it should be in there that if it's outside, how, you know, there shouldn't be an issue if somebody has it inside a permanent structure. I'm not talking about a canvas lean-to on the side of the house, but
Right, garage or something.
a permanent structure. But we have a lot of people that have what they feel are collector's items. That doesn't, in their eyes, it is. So who's going to make the decision? Or you find another 49 panhead you want to bring home, and it sits there for a while, and in 6 months you can't find parts. But if you had it inside, but I'm just thinking real quick what you said.
Right.
A boat, and like I said, real quickly, I can envision this. There's 2 boats sitting on a trailer, and they don't go anywhere. This could apply to a lot of things, but maybe if we just. I know that, again, this is only for advertisement, but, but after I read this, I started thinking about it, and I thought about a little bit of the discussion you and I had at one point. But, to do away with the motor part, and then maybe somewhere in here or reword it that, so we don't get into an issue of just because if somebody gets jealous of somebody having their toy in the garage, and when they see the door open, they get jealous because they don't have one, and they start calling up and complaining, this thing's not registered. It's been in there for 5 years, and
I think, and I'm
not trying to make it too complicated, but
no, I think the 2 points you brought up are good ones, and on the one issue, I guess we'll have to ask the solicitor, and I think I'm looking through some papers now, whether or not we could expand this possibly. How could we? What definition would we have to alter to sort of catch different kinds of vehicles? But the one thing I did want to bring up in terms of outdoor versus indoor, I thought this was, maybe it's in the chapter that's specifically addressed to, it was dealing more with outside. Is that correct? I thought there was something regarding this that when you and I had spoke, it really was dealing more with the outside vehicles, not really dealing anything with indoor.
This is, the way the entire section is written, this would not deal with cars that are parked in somebody's garage where it's the project car where they're working on for a significant period of time. When this issue was first raised by Mr. Bennett a few months ago, we did have a discussion about cars, trucks, campers, all of those things. We believe those are all covered by motor vehicles. We also felt that there were the registration aspect of a vehicle is what allows Mr. Bennett to determine what vehicles he's able to cite. Because if you have a car that's licensed or inspected and registered, and you just have it sitting there constantly, it's a little difficult for us to go and enforce this ordinance.
Right.
This is meant for, again, the project car that somebody has up on blocks. It's not inspected, it's not registered. We also felt from looking at the ordinance that there were sufficient sections for the Code Enforcement Department to deal with the non-motor vehicle type items that are in your driveway, the boat trailers, the boats, the things along those lines. So we think that that is already covered in this section. What we attempted to do with this was not to prevent somebody from having one of these cars on their driveway, unregistered, uninspected, but to make sure that if it sits there for 6 months and it's nothing's being done with it, that it gives us the enforcement ability to go in and say, you have to move this, you have to get it out, or you have to get it inspected or registered, and that may move people a little quicker.
But it's something that really looks like it's a derelict, not something that you know.
Right.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, comments or concerns regarding Mr. Zipka's
Yeah, I think
points?
the object is right now, we have no power to do anything, and it can stay there forever. And matter of fact, I took Mr. Gray for a ride today, and I showed him a car that I know that's been there for 15 years. And you can pick them out, and I agree with you 100%. And it's just something to give us, I get a neighbor complaint, and I'm sure we're going to get some of this. Neighbors don't like neighbors. That's what we get. We get that all the time. But we're going to get some of that. But, you have to deal with that. That comes with the job. But this way, at least we can tell them they got to move it, get rid of it, do something with it, get it out of there in 6 months.
And the other thing I think that's important to point out that Mr. Bennett and I had discussed was the fact that the Boca Code says no inoperative or unlicensed cars on your property. When we amended our code back several years ago, we went with an older version that allowed you to keep one, but then we didn't place any time restriction on it. So I think in discussing this with Mr. Bennett, where we kind of came to was we were going to kind of go halfway in between. We were going to allow you to have it, but not for 15 years, not for 5 years, that if you had it, it had to be something that was being worked on. And I don't know if we're going to say that Mr. Bennett is, there are probably a lot of these cars in the township, but if somebody's working on a car that they're trying to get done, hopefully the code enforcement department will use a little bit of discretion in those matters when there's progress being made, as opposed to the car that's had a tarp on it and has been up on blocks and now has weeds growing through the trunk. I think that's what we're really trying to prevent.
We're trying to be reasonable and still accomplish what we need to accomplish.
Oh, no, like I said, I agree with you, because I believe I know very well, a year or so ago.
I know what boat you're talking about.
Yeah, we're all this, we're all this started from too, down, but I just don't want to see, a resident get caught up in something that, again, in my eyes, it might be something that I wouldn't have no idea why you would even want it, but in their eyes, it's something, and they try to keep it, up.
Right.
But I just thought about if again, I know this is for advertisement only. I just thought about the idea of the boat, or well, it says a motor vehicle. Well, somebody had a horse trailer or 2 horse trailers sitting there for a while.
But when I first initially wrote it up, it was like 3/4 of a page. It was quite lengthy and confusing. To try and not miss try not to miss anything. And then it got really blown out of proportion and confusing. So in order to try and keep it simple and still accomplish what we want, this was the wording that Mr. Clark came up with.
Okay. All right. Other questions? Mr. Snipes?
Yes. How does this compare to ordinances that other townships have? Are you saying that most of them are more stringent than what's been proposed here?
Most are more stringent.
Right.
The International Property Maintenance Code says absolutely no vehicles are allowed. Some townships change and let you have one. It may have to be covered. It might have to be, a time limit, parked on a driveway or a blacktop surface to keep them off the yards. It's
something else.
They go from left field to right field. They're all over the place.
Right. I'd like to. I mean, I'm going to support this tonight for authorization for advertising.
Well, yeah, it's advertisement.
I'd like to get a lot of public input to hear how people, in different neighborhoods are feeling about this, because probably for every person who wants that car out of there, there's somebody else who says, I'm getting there, and I'm saving this for my son. It's going to get repaired, but it may take a couple years. So I just want to get input. I want us to be fair to residents and their needs, especially now as folks are in hard situation economically. A lot of people.
Yeah, and I feel we use pretty good discretion on. We don't run around just trying to create problems.
Right.
We get enough without looking for them. and we're pretty reasonable with people, and we can tell when what's
Right.
reasonable and what's unreasonable on their part too.
Right.
So
So I agree with you, and I'd like to, hopefully people will come to meetings or can give information to the township, call the manager's office, and let us know, what you think of this,
Sure,
proposal.
absolutely. They can email the township and give us their input on it.
Right. That's all.
Mr. Dens?
So if someone has, a registered vehicle in their property, we really can just tell them they have to get rid of it or remove it?
No,
If it's
if
registered.
it's
So what if they
registered.
just register it, then?
Then they can keep it
that's
there
the
for as long
loophole.
as they want.
Right. So we're just going to basically make people register everything they have in their driveway.
All the boats, all the horse trailers, all the cars, all the trucks.
They have to pay for the registration.
Right.
Right.
Mr. Dens,
And
to
has
answer
to
your question
pass.
a little bit more fully, the ordinance says any more than one inoperative or unlicensed motor vehicle. Again, technically, I guess you could have a car up on blocks that you get registered and you get inspected, but that's really not what we're seeing. We're seeing that these are cars that are sitting for extended periods of time.
I understand.
They're not inspected, they're not licensed. And again, to go back to the question that Mr. Snipes had asked, most of the other municipalities that I deal with are more restrictive than this. They don't allow any cars that aren't registered or inoperative to be on the property. They either have to be garaged or they have to be off the property.
And I guess once it's registered, it has to be insured.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, and I think back, I think it was last year before, there was a situation where there was a car that was going to be moved that had been sitting there so long, a tree had actually grown up through, the front of the car where the engine was supposed to be. Literally, they had to cut the tree down first and then lift the car over the stump that was
It
there.
becomes art at that point.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we could have sold that for a lot of money, probably, that person. Yeah. Put it in a museum somewhere. All right, so again, authorizing advertisement only, and then we'll come back to this at a future meeting to approve, and we may come back with some changes. We'll take a look at the issues. Does this cover enough vehicles, or do we have some things in our code that cover other vehicles that may not be motor vehicles, as Mr. Zupka said? We'll have to check that out. But and I agree with Mr. Snipes' point. Obviously, want to hear from people and see what they think. Like I said, I've gotten complaints pretty regularly from people. Is there anything you can do? My neighbor has this vehicle. They haven't done anything with it. It's just sitting there. It's an eyesore. There's rats living under it. All this kind of thing. And usually, my next call is to Mr. Bennett, and ask him if there's anything we can do. And so this would give more teeth to our code department. We will take, I guess, if there's any public comment at this point, just on authorizing advertisement. See a motion, or see a hand rather. Is there a motion to open public comment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Mr. Dell? Are all your cars licensed, Mr. Dell?
So far, right now. What about commercial properties? Is this all just residential? But, we all know when you drive through the township, some of the commercial properties on the roadside, these guys will keep a truck for spare parts or until the thing rots away into the ground with all the fluids leaking into the gravel. I mean, is it just going to be residential?
What I'm reading here, says housing standards, so I'm not sure of what section it's in, if it's replying only to residential. It says premises in the actual section. Premises would be any kind of property, but...
It's in the portion of the code that deals with residential properties.
Will it ever go commercial? Or I understand that, say, an auto body shop's going to have some spare
Right. cars
cars laying around, but I'm talking about open, like say you drive down Pennsylvania Avenue and you see trailers and trucks that aren't going to move, haven't moved in 20 years, aren't going to move in another 20 years, and they're just going to rot away.
Yeah, but
It depends on the business.
I would guess if the people that own the property, if the business owns the property and it's their vehicles,
they can do whatever they want.
It depends on the operation, right?
If it's a trucking company or
Yes.
or well, I don't want to pick on anybody, but there's a trailer the trailer
Yes.
repair over there. They got some things there that they haven't made parts for.
Yes, yeah, that's
You weren't even born.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm talking about. 50s vintage trailers are sort of just sitting there and the tires are dissolving, and I was just curious if it was going to include that or if that's something separate. And then the trailer aspect, you could just add all registered motor vehicles or anything that requires registration, driver's, license plate, whatever. But a trailer, I don't believe you need insurance to have a registration on a trailer. I think you just register the trailer, boat trailers, whatever. They could pay their $12. And I think it'd still sit out there and languish for $12 a year. So maybe you want to get some wording around the trailer aspect of that thing, because if it's $12, they're going to spend the $12 and the trailer's still going to
Well,
rot.
that's it. If it's registered, that's the loophole for some,
Yes.
some of the things.
Yeah, so maybe if it's unusable or, not usable, or I don't know how far you can go with that, but
Right.
some people do like to store junk, and, they think it's going to be worth $1 million one day, and it really isn't, and I understand why you're doing it, but.
Okay. No, I think it's a good point. It's a point that Mr. Zipker brought up, and I think what we'll have to do is, as Mr. Clark said, he remembers looking through the ordinances before and thought there was enough teeth in other parts that would deal with issues like that or a boat. But we'll have to verify that just to make sure that it's really clear. And if it isn't, and we can maybe change this a little bit, or maybe if it makes more sense just to tweak that other part of the ordinance, rather than copy it all over again into this one. If it's already written somewhere else and just needs a little addition, we can look to do that too.
Okay.
Okay, but I think
Thank
it's a
you.
good point. Thank you. Any other public comment? Let's see a couple of hands. Mr. Robert, and then we'll go to Mr. Mariani.
It doesn't take much for the neighborhood to go to pot, and allowing cars, trucks, canvas canopies, boats, trailers, lawnmowers, and so forth to sit here, there, and so forth just brings your neighborhood down. And if you have to, they just have to get rid of it. That's all. It's not allowed, period. I'm starting to see a lot of canvas trailer or canvas garages. You cover a boat, well, you take a boat out to sea, you don't take the canopy with you because it's not going to stop it anyway. So I'd like to see you get rid of the boat trailers. Maybe we should start a, what would you call it, an RV parking lot down at the park somewhere. Keep that in mind and say, hey, you want to park it? You can park it here, there, and so forth. Keep that in mind also. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Mariani?
Just a quick observation. The registration of the motor vehicle is not going to be a way out of this, because you can't register it. It also has to be inspected.
Right.
So if it has to be inspected,
right,
it's not a loophole that
Sure. No,
somebody
yeah.
may think it is.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Any other comments? No? Motion to close public comment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. Is there a motion then to authorize advertisement of this amendment to Chapter 138?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Mr. Bennett, what'd you sit down for? You're up again. Had to get a drink. All right, the next, again, authorizing advertisement of an amendment to Chapter 209. This regards zoning. And this was an issue that I know Mr. Dents had worked on a little bit regarding the zoning hearing board and how notifications are sent out to neighboring properties when a property comes up for some kind of zoning hearing. Mr. Bennett, you want to explain a little bit maybe about how we do it now, and then maybe what some of the problems were and what these change will do?
Yeah, at the present time, when a residential, this doesn't include commercial, just residential. Residential zoning appeal came in front of the zoning hearing board. The owner of the property was required to notify any person who owns property that abuts their property at least 5 days before the hearing of the date and time of the hearing. So if a neighbor or a property owner that touched their property didn't agree with, say, a side addition going too close to the property line, they could come to the hearing and voice their opinion. We seem to have a lot of problems with this, where a neighbor, if you look at a property and it's a rectangle property, and they think they have a neighbor on this side, and one in the back, and they don't know the exact property line that might touch this corner and that corner. So they forget to notify two neighbors. So then the zoning hearing board would table it, and then they'd have to wait an additional 30 days to come back to the next hearing, which is a great inconvenience to the residents. So we felt that it'd be pretty simple for us to draft up we already did it, a letter, and just have the secretary send them out to all the adjoining property owners, because we have access to all the zoning maps, and we know how many letters have to go out to avoid the residents from having any problems when they get to the meeting. So the notification would be done by us, and then we will know it's done right, hopefully.
Right.
And then it'll save the residents a lot of heartache.
Okay. And as you said, this is only for residential properties. It would not count, somebody, Gamesa comes down and wants to do something, we're not going to be doing it for them. They're going to have to do it themselves.
Like, commercial properties have to notify everybody in a quarter-mile radius. So we're not going to do that. They usually hire professionals to do that for them.
Okay. Okay. All right, comments or questions for Mr. Bennett regarding this change to our zoning ordinance? Mr. Zupka?
Thank you. When you send out the letter, is it going to be specific as to what is being done, or is it just going to be a form letter that something's coming up in front of the zoning for your neighbor, adjacent property, such and such? And
We've already drawn up, matter of fact, we practiced for this next meeting. There's only one appeal. Let's get it going. What it says is the time and date of the hearing, the zoning section, and the reason for the variance, so that
so it'll say, like, if it's a pool or
it'll say a swimming pool, say too close to the house, too close to the property line, or a shed or garage, whatever.
Okay.
Whatever the variance is for, it'll
just
be
give the
explained in there what it is for, and then that way the neighbor or the adjoining property owner will know what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Snipes?
And you don't feel this is that our staff would be able to handle this? It's not that much of an issue that it's going to...
It'll be no problem at all.
Not that extensive.
At the most, on a residential property, 99% of the time, you have the most 5 adjoining properties.
Right.
So it's 5 letters that go out. We know it's done. It actually will save us re-advertising.
Right,
It'll save the residents costs. Right. So you do it ahead of time and get it over with, and it should be no problem at all.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dents?
During my time on the zoning board, many times I've seen people come that didn't realize they had to give written notice, and they gave verbal notice thinking everything was going to go through, to find out, like Mr. Bennett said, they were sent back home for another 30 days when they've already waited a long time hoping to simply put up a fence. So this is, it's easy enough for us to do. We could even hand deliver them when we're putting up the posting.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
That's all.
Okay. And I don't have any other questions. Is there any public comment needed? I see no hands. All right, is there a motion to authorize advertisement to this amendment to Chapter 209?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Bennett, Ms. Rukoff, you're off the clock, I guess. If you want to, you can hang out if you want to. That's fine, but you don't need to more. Oh, you have to stay. Mr. Obert says you're not allowed to leave. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
All right. All right. All right. So, okay. So, and I want to thank you for being here this evening too and helping us out. We're up to public comment. We have 4 names on the list, and the first name on the list is Roland Kenny.
Roland Kenny, Falls Township. I was watching the news tonight before I came here. Down in Philadelphia, they were asking people what day it is. And 20-year-old, 30, 40-year-old people never heard of Pearl Harbor. I don't know what we're learning in school, but the 2 dates that should be on everybody's mind is 7/11. 12/7 and 9/11. They're the 2 days that we were attacked. And I couldn't believe these. And I seen 60, 70-year-old people didn't know what day it was. I mean, how easy we forget. These are 2 dates we should never forget. All right, I'll leave that go. Came in here last Thursday. And I was shocked when I drove up to the door out there. I seen Mr. Gray's private secretary out there putting down towels all over the place. Back in the hallway back here, she's moving garbage cans around to catch the water. We got leaks all over this roof, but yet we're going to spend $1.5 million down or something like that down the senior center that I don't think needs it. We ought to take care of this roof first. I mean, there's no reason Mr. Gray's secretary should be out there putting down towels and catching the water. I mean, this roof needs fixing. We ought to fix this building first before we do anything. Thursday and Friday is Pennsbury's Holly Night. If anybody can get out there, it's from, I think, 5:30 to 9 o'clock. Hope to see a lot of people out there. And then Saturday, I think for Three Arches is having the lighting of the tree. So with that, I'll say good night and God bless you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kenny, we did budget this year to do a study and look into doing a lot of repairs and renovations in the building. So it is on our to-do list.
Yeah.
And it is a complete mess in that atrium.
Study's one thing.
Well, we can't just do patches here and there. We got to figure out what we want to do exactly.
Do the whole roof.
Well, not just the roof, the whole building. I mean,
Yeah.
that atrium there is a scary
big-
place.
Yeah, the atrium is
The
the big
winter, the summer, the rain, whatever's going on.
Of course, Joan roofed. She out there like a little helper man. She's going along with these towels, putting them down and everything. I said, I can't believe this. We got to stop her from doing that.
No, I agree.
Good.
Mr. Mariani.
I guess I want to comment one more time on that $1.2 billion that's in our budget that I don't think ought to be there, about the senior center. Ms. Hagan, at the last meeting, she referred to the Older American Act. And that's an act that was passed as part of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program. It's going to expire in 2011 unless it's reauthorized, and I think it probably will be. What the act does, it created the National Aging Network that provides funding based on a percentage of an area's population 60 or older for various support programs. And the act is divided into 7 titles, which we're not going to go through tonight. Now, Ms. Hagan mentioned several programs in which our Falls Township Center participates. Now, to what degree these programs are available and the measurable benefit that they provide in addition to the membership participation, I think is really questionable, and I think we ought to consider that before this budget is approved. The same services that she was talking about are readily available in many of our churches, socially conscious groups that we have here, and organizations in our area, and quite frankly, to a much larger degree than our center does. Less than 1% of all our residents participate in this center's activities. Now, really, in the economic climate that we have now, with unemployment expected to be at 10% through 2011 at least, families, some of them unable to provide the basic needs, and others are losing their homes, this isn't the time to be putting that kind of money to expand this center's home. It just isn't right, not this time. Another thing is, they may find that that center is more than adequate by better scheduling some of the activities that they have. Now, the proposed $1.2 million, that's going to be more than that if we get involved in it, I think is misdirected, and this township is under no obligation to provide that kind of assistance. They are already receiving $385,000 from the Community Development Block Grant. But I never heard anybody mention that almost $400,000 that they're already getting on top of the 1.2 that we want to give them. I'm going to say it again, it's almost 17 times, so it'll stick with you. We better service our community by selling that present site, building a community center in which the seniors can be a part of. Lower Makefield's considering doing that, and I think they're going to get, what, it's $1 million from the state, participate. Another use of this money is to put it in a fund, an income-producing fund, with a lot of our other monies, and send checks, dividend checks, to our residents every single year. As a matter of fact, at the very least, if we didn't spend this 1.2 and stop construction on that unnecessary boat ramp, we could probably have a tax-free year in 2011. Please consider that again. Please consider taking that 1.2 million out of there. You already had to move $1 million over to cover your shortfall this year. We're under no obligation to support that center. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gal Silbert?
Gee, I could almost save myself the time coming up after listening to Mr. Mariani, because I've talked about those things also. We got a budget of $85,695,667. We got 4 proposals for sidewalks on New Falls that cost us X number of dollars. We had a shovel-ready product at the intersection of Tyburn and New Falls Road. I haven't seen those lights change. We had a boundary dispute with Tullytown, which may cost us some money. We also had the boat ramp that we've already spent a lot of money on. We've spent a lot of money doing nowhere. It's just like paddling in the water. You're not going anywhere except maybe deeper. Last time I was here was back in November, and Mrs. Rukoff kindly gave me a copy of the proposed budget thing that she put up on the flat screen up here. And I finally had a chance to go through all these items and so forth. And if you bear with me, gentlemen, I'll mention them, okay, and hope that you will take it to heart and start to listen to the people. There's only 5 of us here. I don't know where the other 17,000 or 27,000 people are. They're all sitting home watching the ball game and watching these $1 million football players and so forth like that. So let me ask this. How much longer will the income last from the waste management fund? Okay? I don't want the answer. I don't expect the answers. On page 5 of it, it says the road program, 211 road program, and it lists 5 rows and so forth. But I don't see anything listing the dollars for the road program to accompany this nice brochure that we put out. We're going to do in-house mill and overlay projects. By that, I assume they mean that it's going to be done by our road crew. Okay. And then on page 6, whoops, top sign, Falls Township Senior Center. I think I've seen 3 or 4 layouts. We've spent a lot of money doing that. Just making layouts and proposals and so forth. Maybe that would have paid for half of it. I don't know. You go down to the next slide, and it's police purchases. It says $436,000 and so forth for this, that, new vehicles, computer equipment, firearms training and supplies. And we've had firearms training before, and I'd like to see more detail than what's given in the police purchases. Community park improvements, $99,000 budgeted for the improvement at the Falls Community Park. 20 additional parking spaces next to the basketball court. 20 additional. How many do we have now? 30? How many do we have? 5? I don't know. I don't play basketball anymore. Offhand.
For about 12, probably.
Then, now we want to add 30 more parking places for the skateboard. Pennsbury had a school parking lot that they were going to repave. And lo and behold, the parking lot has been there for 35 years, maybe longer. When they took it up, they said, well, it's not compactable enough. So they spent $47,000 to go down and dig up this non-compactable dirt and bring in 200 and some loads of compactable dirt before they put the blacktop on. There's another example of, in my opinion, wasted money. And I'm just wondering, now we got 10 exercise stations along phase 1 and 2 of the walkways. People don't even go out of their own house and go out back and jump rope. I think gentlemen, I guess what I'm saying is I think we're spending an awful lot of money that we don't have to spend. You may agree, you may not agree. Okay? $200,000 for handicap accessible play equipment. The next one gets me. Street light upgrades. At the bottom of Hanford Road and Olds Boulevard, you have one of these LEDs. And that LED gives, in my opinion, 50% less light and coverage than the bulbs that we have out there now. And I think they look pretty rotten compared to the aesthetics of Falls Township and the community. Public Works, we're going to spend $35,000 for TV video equipment. For where? For the community park and Mill Creek Road Sports Complex. Who is going to watch the video equipment 24/7? Anybody ever think about who's going to do that? It's going to be in a police station, and he's going to be writing his report, and he's going to look up, there's nobody there. And he'll be writing some more, and he'll go get a cup of coffee. And nothing against the police, don't misunderstand me, but they're not going to sit there and watch security cameras in a park and so forth. And I think that's another waste of $35,000. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to adopt a budget according to this thing December 7th. Not going to make it, I don't think. But then I went through, and I appreciate the extra time, because at school board meeting, they cut me off at 5 minutes. You know that, if you watch, well, if you ever watch it. I looked at the 211 proposed budget, and I have one question here. Falls Township Falls Authority will support the fund, the general fund. Well, so wait a minute, that's not the one. Wait a minute. Transfer. Waste. No. Oh, Falls Township Authority will support the general fund with $503,000 as their annual interest payment. If they're paying $503,000 as an interest payment, they must have borrowed an awful lot of money. And when are they going to start paying back on the principal?
Next year.
I don't want to hold my hand on my head for that one.
No.
That's for darn sure.
That's fine.
Yeah, everything's fine.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Kaufman? No? Okay. All right. Okay, those are all the names on the list. Is there anybody else who wants to speak? Okay. There are quite a few issues brought up, and I'm going to get to them during my board comment, a lot of the comments that were made tonight at the public comment, but I want to move us through the rest of the meeting here. All right. Next item on the agenda is the minutes. We have two sets of minutes from November 3rd and November 16th. The last meeting, Mr. Dents was not able to vote on the November 3rd meeting minutes because he was not at that meeting, and he had not had a chance to review the meeting via videotape. I've talked with him earlier, and he's prepared to do that now. And so comments or questions regarding November 3rd meeting minutes? If not, is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second the motion.
Okay, motion is made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. All right, on November 16th meeting minutes. Comments or questions regarding the minutes as presented? Mr. Zupka, comments or questions?
None.
Mr. Snipes?
No, sir.
Mr. Dents?
None.
And I have none. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
Make the motion.
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say that once again, I believe that our minutes are in excellent shape, and we have had the excellent services of minute taking over the past couple of years, and they continue in great shape.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let's see. For manager comment, we're going to be splitting some time here between our two professionals. Mr. Clark is going to do some work, and Mr. Sullivan, who wants to go first here?
Apparently, I'm going to go first, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I have 3 letters of extension requests. The first one is in a letter dated December 1st, 2010. Nicholas A. Cousset, Jr. requests an extension of time through January 31st, 2011 for consideration of an application for conditional use for T-Mobile Northeast LLC to install cellular antennas on an existing tower at 1000 New Ford Mill Road. Board of Supervisors asked to consider approval of this requested extension.
Okay. All right, is there any comments or questions on the letter of extension?
No.
No? All right, is there a motion to grant the letter of extension to January 31st, 2011?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
In a letter dated November 22nd, 2010, Kurt J. Schaefer, Esquire, requests extension to March 31st, 2011 for a land development application for the learning experience to be located at 8829 New Falls Road. The board is again asked to consider an approval of this requested extension.
Okay. All right. Let's see, comments or questions here regarding the letter of extension from Mr. Schaefer?
No.
No?
None.
Okay. Is there a motion made to grant the letter of extension for the learning experience to March 31st, 2011?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And the last letter is in a letter dated November 30th, 2010. Thomas R. Hecker requests extension to March 31st, 2011 for consideration of the land development known as Viking Associates located on, I believe, Trenton Avenue.
Okay. All right, is there a motion, any comments or questions? All right, is there a motion
I
to?
have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
What happens if this expires, Mr. Clark?
In some ways, nothing would happen if it expires. Mr. Hecker and his client are not ready to come before the Board of Supervisors because the zoning matter is still under appeal. As you will recall, several months ago, the applicant came back with a concept for an alternative proposal, and they are putting that together, so everything has been sort of put on hold right now.
Thank you. That's
Okay.
all.
All right, is there a motion to grant letter of extension to March 31st, 2011?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 Park and Rec announcements. The annual Holiday Children's Party will be held on Saturday, December 11th on the grounds of Three Arches from 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. There will be a puppet show, a DJ playing Christmas music, children carnival games, mad science slime demos, pizza, Christmas cookies, and juice boxes under the tent, and hot cider inside the house. And Santa Claus will arrive at 5 p.m. on a fire engine. Children ages 12 and under are welcomed, and this event is free. The annual tree lighting ceremony will also take place on Saturday, December 11th on the grounds of Three Arches. This will be at 6:30 p.m. immediately following the Holiday Children's Party. There will be Christmas songs, welcome comments from dignitaries, concluding with the lighting of the big tree. Then one other announcement is the Park and Recreation Winter Brochure, which lists all of the winter recreation programs. Activities will be available for the public immediately following the holidays on Tuesday, January 4th, 2011. And the winter recreation programs will begin the week of January 24th. If you have any questions regarding the winter recreation programs, you should visit, or any questions about Park and Rec, you can either go to the Township website at www.fallstwp.com and click on Parks and Rec, or you can call the Park and Rec Department at 215-949-9000, extension 220. Thank you.
Okay. Very good.
Well done, Mr. Clark.
Nice job. Success.
Do we have any details on the slime demonstration?
Yeah. Not sure.
I do not. It's a mad science slime demo. That's all we know.
We don't know who's doing the puppet show?
We do not know who is doing the puppet show. We do not.
Okay. All right.
Certified mad scientist will be there with his or her slime.
I believe it will be.
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent.
Mr. Bennett is going to review the mad scientist, make sure he complies with all codes.
Excellent.
All right. Okay, we're up to board comment. Let's start with Mr. Dent. You want to go first?
Sure. I had an email, I guess a couple weeks ago, from a woman whose neighbor or someone that she knew fell over a trash can that was blocking a sidewalk. And I just wanted to make sure people know that it's homeowners' responsibility to keep their sidewalks clear of trash cans, cars, or anything else. It came up again, well, actually before that, when speaking about people walking in the street. Someone sent me an email. People walk in the street because the sidewalks are always blocked by cars and driveways or trash cans on sidewalks or whatever it may be. This is something that we've talked about with Mr. Bennett, with the police department, and this is something that the police department is going to have their eye out for. So hopefully this gets resolved and we can keep the sidewalks clear. I know Waste Management, when they collect trash, they're supposed to put trash cans back where they get them from, whether it be in the street or on the lawn. Now, we all know that doesn't always happen, but, I mean, putting them on the sidewalk isn't a good enough excuse because it's blocking the sidewalk, basically. The other thing I have is, I guess about 3 weeks ago, Sunday morning, I opened my front door, and being someone that lived in the city for a long time, it was a shock to me to see a deer running down Independence Drive. And I had to look twice and make sure I was still awake, wasn't still sleeping. My neighbors weren't surprised. They say they're all over. And then again, you'll see signs were recently put up on Tyburn Road warning of the deer crossing, which has become a problem down there. And then someone else told me about deer on Oxford Valley Road, where there usually aren't deer, near Hood Boulevard, and someone almost hit one with a car.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's because of they're shooting them in Lower Makefield and they're all migrating this way, or they just seem to be out a lot more this year than they have been. But just beware when you're driving around of the deer, which there seem to be a lot more of in our area than there usually are. And that's all I have tonight.
It's a better place to live in Lower Makefield anyway, I think, isn't it? Yeah, so.
If you're a deer, yeah. Goose might be another story.
Right, yeah, that's right. If you're a goose, you'd rather go to Lower Makefield. That's fine. We'll pay for them. We'll move them there. All right, Mr. Zupko?
Thank you. Just to follow up a little bit with Mr. Denson, the deer moving from Lower Makefield, we better, they have the bear hunt going on in New Jersey. Mr. Kenny brought it up a little bit earlier, and I just want to touch on this. The day that'll live in infamy, and the other date. December 7th, 1941 was 69 years ago. And then we have 9/11. There are two dates that I think they'll live, as it was said, then they'll live in infamy. But it changed the generation. The generation in the 40s, the 30s, the 40s, December 7th in Pearl Harbor, everybody seemed to lose their innocence at that point. Some of the people here will say their grandfathers, me, my father, my uncles, my mom, my aunts. 9/11, the same thing. A whole different generation lost what they thought was a very safe existence up there, and it happened. And you can become complacent, but you have to remember. Just relate this very quickly. I heard the stories from actually it was my father, but would hear from him and my uncle. My father was on a ship sailing out of San Diego to Pearl Harbor, and he got there on December the 9th, and he related, and it's hard to imagine, but the water was a dark red, and he carried a flag the whole time he was in the Pacific that he got at Pearl. And well, I'm proud to say I buried him with that flag, but he carried it all through the Pacific. And another date that some people might not know, and it's like, say, a current generation, tomorrow, December the 8th, 1980, it was 30 years ago when John Lennon left the world and left us his legacy. A lot of things have happened this time of the year, and I know I always say it, and I'll say it, keep saying it, but we have to remember our police, our firemen, our armed forces, and especially coming up with the holidays. If you know anybody that a member of the family's away, take the extra time and see if you can, maybe we'll say just brighten up their holidays a little bit. I believe there is still 3 Pearl Harbor veterans right in this area. I know one's in Hamilton. I believe one's up in Doylestown. I think we have one in Bristol. They're in their 90s, but they survived Pearl Harbor. But well, that's about it. Holidays coming. We're not having our lighting contest.
Yeah, I'm going to make that announcement.
Okay, it's the Christmas lighting contest.
I think it's called the Holiday House Decorating Contest.
So if you have a Christmas tree, you don't fall into that.
That's
Never.
fine.
I won't get into that.
Never
Never mind. Yeah, but yeah, it's a good time of the year to be with the family, and I still believe. I still wait for Santa to show up. Maybe someday you will. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Snipes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to share something of a kind of a personal nature, but I think it relates to a lot of us, or could potentially, that my wife and I had the terrible experience of a house fire this past week. In our case, luckily, we arrived in time to put it out. It only caused minor damage in terms of fire and structure, but very serious damage throughout the house with smoke. And I hadn't really thought that much about smoke damage, but it's a complicated thing involving all your woodwork and your carpets and your furniture and your clothing, and so we'll have to deal with that. But we're just really grateful that for 2 things. One, that it wasn't worse than it was, and many people have experienced much worse things than we have, and I have a newfound sympathy and understanding of what folks have gone through, but also real heartfelt thanks to Rich DiPolito, our fire marshal, and other members, excuse me, volunteer firefighters in the area who were at the house, helped us out, and were able to use their sensors to detect that there was no more fire in the walls. And so we did lose a pet in the process, which was sad, but we're very, very lucky compared, I think, to a lot of people. So I would like to just mention, especially this time of year, and people are plugging in a lot of extra electrical, a lot of extra lights, holiday lights, maybe they're burning candles. In our case, it looks like it was a lamp that malfunctioned or was too close to a blanket. So just asking people to be hyper vigilant about your homes always, but especially now if you're having a lot of people in and out of the house, and if you're setting up a lot of lights and maybe overloading your circuits, or if you're using candles. It's fire spreads really, really quickly, as we saw, and the smoke damage is also a very serious thing, even if you're able to put the fire out. So it's kind of a note of warning to everybody, but also a real note of thanks to our fire marshal and other volunteer firefighters who helped us out. So we're very, very grateful for that, and have a new thankfulness for having a home. I can only imagine what it's like to actually lose your home in the process through fire and water damage, and we're not going to go through all that, but other people have, so I have a lot of sympathy for them. But again, asking people to be very careful, especially with your smoke alarms. A lot of people, and I have to admit I've done this too, have disconnected their smoke alarms when they go off too frequently when you're cooking or when you're showering and the water vapor hits them. But that's for a reason. As annoying as it is, that's for a real reason. And there are stories of people that don't get out of their homes or buildings in time because the smoke alarms were disconnected or they didn't have any. It's pretty simple to go down to the store and buy a battery-operated smoke alarm. Even better is to put in hardwired smoke alarms that are even more sensitive, and they do go off, and it's annoying even when there's no danger, but they're there to protect you so that when there is danger, you really are protected. So I would recommend people, please make sure that your smoke alarms are in good shape. And thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. And obviously good to hear that things are well with you and the family and the house. Obviously, loss of the pet is a painful thing, but obviously we all know it could have been worse. So,
yes, thank you.
And just to mention something that you had just talked about, the smoke alarms. For many people, if installing a smoke alarm is too difficult, if you're elderly, you're not able to do it, contact the fire department, and they will have somebody come out and install it for you. It only takes a very, very short amount of time, and it's something they want to do. It helps them do their jobs, obviously, and they care about your safety.
I think they'll even supply it.
Yeah, and I didn't want to mention that without being sure, but I think you're right, Mr. Zipka. I think even if you can't afford to get one yourself, or you can't get out to buy one again, if you're not able to get to the store and get one, the fire department can provide you with one. So you can call them, contact them even through the fire marshal's office or directly through their phone. Obviously, you wouldn't call 911 for that, but if you were looking to get some help with the fire alarm, you could contact either the Falls Township Fire Company, Levittown Fire Company number 1, or Farrell Hills Fire Company. Okay, a few things this evening. I just wanted to also, I guess, Mr. Densa brought up the issue of blocking sidewalks, and one of the things I've starting to notice more, and it probably has always been this way, and I just haven't seen it, but trash cans and leaf bags, especially now with the leaves going, that are being placed on the corner ramps, the ADA ramps that were put in, that people use sometimes even if they're on bikes or pushing a baby stroller, obviously designed for people in wheelchairs so they can get up onto sidewalks crossing the street. Also, an area where you cannot block those. And it's, again, going back to your responsibilities as a homeowner, to keep the sidewalks clear and also keep those ramps clear so that people can use them if they need to. A few issues brought up tonight that I wanted to address. A couple of issues regarding the senior center and the money budgeted for that. The money budget is about $1.2 million. Mr. Mariani mentioned that the senior center gets money already. And that is true, and he talked a little bit about verifying. A lot of the, if not all, of the reimbursements the senior center gets from the state and from different agencies, they have to provide a listing of how many people participated. If it's a lunch and they're getting money for lunches they provide, they have to show how many people came. They have to, if people are doing different activities at the senior center, they have to provide basically sign-in sheets. So they have to, they can't just say, well, we had this many people. They need to provide actual documentation in order to receive that money. In addition, the discussion of there being $400,000 through the Community Development Block Grant in addition to $1.2 million is not accurate. In fact, we've said several times, Mr. Mariani said that nobody's mentioned it. Well, that's not true. We've mentioned several times that the grant from the Community Development Block Grant that's about $385,000, I think, is for this project. And so it's not $1.2 million plus $385,000. It's actually that $385,000 lowers the township's cost down to around $800,000 for this project. So this is a project where you see county money coming in, federal money, but through the county, and also the township using some of the host community fees. In terms of taking all this money from the boat ramp and from the senior center and giving everybody a tax-free year, that is something that could happen. And obviously tax-free would mean for everybody. Businesses would have to be tax-free. Any industry would be tax-free. Every property. We could not just give to residential. And he was right when he said for a year, because that would be about as long as we'd have it. And then we'd have to go back to putting taxes on people again. Is it worth it, or would the money better be spent on providing services for people, park and recreation services, police services, services here in this township building, like the fire marshal's office, et cetera. Mr. Obert took quite a few shots at the community park, and from his criticism, it seems obvious that he hasn't been there very often. In terms of parking, the two areas where we're looking to expand parking are two very, very used areas. The area right by the street hockey rink, if you want to call it that. Basketball courts is used very, very heavily by people going to the dog park, and so an extra 20 or 30 spots there, 20 spots I think, is desperately needed. The parking area on the Phase 2 by the skateboard park and by the one playground is packed on nice days, especially on the weekends, and it is difficult. We actually have people parking up on the grass, instead of in actual spots, because there are no more spots left, and so that parking expansion actually would be creating spots where people are already parking. Instead of being on grass, we're making them actual parking spots. In terms of the exercise equipment that's going to be put around, a lot of parks have these. In terms of him saying that people don't even go out of their backyard or in their backyard to jump rope, again, shows just a lack of knowledge about how much that park is used by how many people for how many activities. People walking, running, biking, rollerblading, walking their dogs, pushing their kids in strollers, and a lot of parks have this kind of situation where you have every once in a while you have different exercise, areas where people can do, stretches, they can do sit-ups, they can do whatever, chin-ups, they can do something that adds to their ability.
It's going to be passive.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's obviously not, any motorized kind of things out there. Right.
I just make that clear to people if they're buying.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You're right. Let's see. And in terms of, again, Mr. Obert making some issue with the taping system, wondering who's going to be watching the taping system 24 hours a day. There's taping systems everywhere, including one right now. But every store you go into and every McDonald's you go into, there's a taping system. Obviously, no one's sitting in front of the screen 24 hours a day. The idea behind a taping system, any one of them, is so that you have added information in case something happens. You can go and review that tape to see what happened, when it happened, who was doing it, and you assist police if there's some kind of investigation that has to happen. And that's the idea behind this. Putting in some cameras, the Mill Creek Sports Complex, they've had some issues with vandalism there, and they've been trying to fight them. This would obviously help us do that. Putting in a system also near the skateboard park and other areas of the township where we could assist our police in taking a look and seeing what's happening. Is there any kind of vandalism? Who's doing it? Maybe helping them out and doing their job and making their community the best it can be. So I think it is money well spent. I think it is money that we've been spending focusing on quality of life issues. You hear more of it tonight, looking at the issues of cars that are just sitting in one spot for years and years and years, trying to help out people who are coming for a zoning ordinance or zoning variance for, a fence or a pool or a deck or an addition or something like that. So I think we've done a good job of spending money wisely, in addition to trying to put as much as we can away and keeping taxes where they've been, and not raising them where you see other people laying people off. Today, a story in the paper about employees being laid off at one municipality in Bucks County, and we're not doing that here. So I think we've done a pretty good job of that over the past few years. People can disagree, and that's fine. But as long as they're disagreeing with facts and not sort of their just beliefs of what they think is fact. And finally, I did want to mention Mr. Zipka talked about the house decorating contest, which we've done now for several years. This is, again, a way to sort of improve quality of life and recognize those people in our community who make the holidays a little brighter. Make this time of year literally brighter in many cases. But you certainly have people in your area, people in your neighborhood who you think, wow, look, these people every year they do such a great job. Everybody likes to look at the house. It's some people sync their lights to music and everything else. This is a way just to recognize them, to say thank you. And you can nominate a house. You can nominate your own house if you want to. Nominate a neighbor's house through the township website. Send in the address. And what will happen is around the time of our next meeting in a couple weeks, all of those houses that have been nominated will be judged, and we'll pick 5 winners, and usually have a nice usually a gift certificate to a local restaurant for them, just to, as a nice way of recognizing them and saying thank you for helping to make this the Christmas season so nice. And sort of staying with the holiday theme, there are a few more nights of Hanukkah, and so for the members of our community who are Jewish, Want to wish you, hope your Hanukkah so far has been very nice, and hope you have a nice rest of the holiday. And again, Christmas in a couple of weeks. This is always a nice time of year, and I don't know, the Farmer's Almanac is calling for not a lot of snow, just a lot of cold air. So we'll see how accurate those farmers are. But we'll see. I know. Not sure if our public works guys are hoping for a lot of snow for the overtime, or they're not hoping for snow because they get a chance to sleep or whatever. But I want to thank board members too for a very productive meeting. I thought we had a lot of good ideas flowing around, the members of the public coming up with some good thoughts, and we analyzed a lot of issues tonight and did so in a very productive way, and I thought we had a very, very good meeting. Thank you to the staff for filling in for Mr. Gray while he was out for a family matter. We hope everything's okay. I'm sure it will be with him. And I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I have one quick question for
sure.
Mr. Bennett.
Yeah.
It is Christmas. If Santa Claus lived in Falls Township, knowing he only uses his sleigh one day a year, you wouldn't give him a hard time for parking it in his driveway for over 6 months, would you?
As long as it's registered, he said. Yeah. It's not a motorized vehicle anyway, is it?
Sure it is.
You know? There you go. Right, yeah.
I'll make a motion to adjourn with that.
All right. Thank you. Is there a second?
Well, I do want to add that to have an exotic animal, he's got to have 25 acres. So if he's got his reindeer under Falls Township ordinance, he can bring them over to Snipes
That's
Farm.
a 25 acres for each exotic animal? That's 8 times 25?
I think it's just for all of them.
Okay, all right.
Don't go wild.
All right.
9.
I'll second the motion.
All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Son passed. I saw that in the paper. Yeah, Pete found out he had a heart attack. I would have said something to him tonight about
The chairman has recessed the meeting and adjourned the meeting at the same time. This is the Falls Township Governmental Access Channel 22 on Comcast
Sure. Yeah, that's
and
fine.
Verizon
Thank you for telling
Fios
me.
Channel
Appreciate that.
14. This has been the Falls Township Board of Supervisor meeting for
that?
December 7th, 2010.
Oh, that thing. Yeah, yeah.
This program was pre-recorded earlier for playback at this time.